Soundings by Mr. Simon Scott. Simon Scott is the drummer for the band Slowdive. Crazy. He is also a English ambient musician, and he has gathered some field recordings from all over the world and aligned them with some kind of modular synth work on this new record to create a pretty beautiful and mesmerizing ambient album. It's called Soundings, and yeah, I thought it was pretty awesome. I just kind of hit play on this thing on a whim, and it actually hooked me pretty quickly with the opening track, Hodos, the kind of huge sort of cacophonous just wall of fucking noise that just blasts on when you hit play on this track. Really took me off guard. I thought it sounded really gorgeous. And despite being a drummer for Slowdive, there is little to no percussion on this album. The only track that had any noticeable drum-like sound was the track Santori, which has this like mild bassy thumping just kind of going on throughout the song. And the way they implement it, I think, is really clever. It sort of sounds like with every like thud, the track is just sort of contorting in and out of focus or something. It's just becoming more and more malformed. And I think it just gives the track a really unsettling personality. And these drums just get totally swallowed by strings like 2 minutes into the track as well, and it just feels like the song just suddenly adopts a just really overpoweringly inspiring sort of tone. I also got to highlight how good the transitions from track to track are on this album. I thought every single one was pretty much seamless. Like every time a new track begins on this album, it's sort of like you just kind of wake up from some slumber into some otherworldly dreamland or some shit, and you're just kind of moving from one to another as the album goes on, and it's just really fucking surreal to listen to. And I think each of these songs has just a certain level of sort of intrigue in regards to the way they're paced and structured, in my opinion. Like the song May, for example, it sort of begins with this kind of jittery, hypnotic, looped sample thing, and then eventually it just kind of blasts into this big wall of noise, and it's just really disorienting. And I think there are just a few decisions like that throughout this album that just keep it really engaging for me. But the album hits its biggest stride, I think, with the final 3 songs, which are, a few of the longer tracks, especially the last 2 in particular. But whilst a lot of this album's most memorable moments are when it gets really dense and thick with like these huge, massive, just cacophonous walls of noise and shit, I actually think the kind of subtlety of the build on the track Nigh is one of the most moving moments on the whole album. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing it right, but the song Baaval, I think, is probably my favorite on this album. I think these weird kind of muffled sound effects that just sort of like grow in intensity as the song continues, and just the more they play, the more unsettling I find them. And I think just those kind of eerie hisses that kick off the track and the way they sort of just like really ominously transition into these really like odd, just like fucking strange, just like deranged, muffled sound effects just buried beneath everything. There's something about it is just really chilling to me. I find the song really effective. I think it's definitely my favorite cut. And the 15-minute long closing track Apricity leaves things off on a pretty solid note. I think this track kind of goes against the formula the album had sort of been, showing you up until this point a little bit. There's like a bit of a rumbling kind of bass on this track that feels pretty different to the other songs. It gives this track just a certain presence that's just really unlike the other cuts to me. And one big complaint I would have with this album has got to be the overuse of strings. Like there are these pretty huge string sections on nearly every song, and it gets a little bit played out, but on this last track, the string sequences kind of have these pretty dazzling highs and lows, and they feel pretty dynamic, and I think it's quite different. Like on this closing track, when the string sequences sort of enter that lower octave, there are some points where they sound like just straight up drones, and it's just really unsettling and eerie. I think it's really, really effective. And I think they're enough to carry you through to the 10-minute 30 mark, which is when the climax of the song sort of begins. And yeah, the ending sequence of this track, this closing song, from 10 minutes 30 to the end, I am just left breathless every time. It's a really wonderful outro to the record, and overall I think it's a really beautiful journey. I would recommend it. I don't think it's phenomenal or amazing, but I think it's definitely one of the most interesting ambient releases I've heard in a little while. Overall, I'm feeling a 7. It's a pretty sweet album. Would recommend it if you're an ambient fan. I think it's pretty beautiful. So yeah, those are my thoughts on Soundings by Simon Scott. Thank you for watching. I'll see you on the next one. Bye.